They called it an anomaly. The first time it blinked into their skies. Not a ship, not a weapon, not anything they recognized. Just a shimmer above the Imperial Citadel, like a drop of black oil floating in space. For 10 seconds, the Empire's best minds stared at it from their thrones and watchtowers. 10 seconds of silence. Then it was gone. Nobody said it out loud, but the air turned different after that. I was stationed at Vornus 3 back then, a backwater listening post that kept watch on the remnants of what used to be Earth's territory. We hadn't heard from Earth in over 100 years. Officially, Earth was neutralized, a polite word for burned, scattered, and forgotten. The Empire never liked to admit they feared what they couldn't conquer. They just erased it. So when I saw that flash again 3 days later, this time over the Moonforge district, I knew something was off. Ships don't just appear like that, especially ones without a signature, without sound, without heat. Command tried to brush it off, said it was an atmospheric glitch. Solar distortion, they called it. But soldiers talk. Old smugglers and half-drunk engineers whispered about an old human warship, something lost in the war a century ago, one that carried a last strike, something so terrible it was buried in myth. Then the disappearances began. Not people. Stations, fleets, whole cities. One moment they were there, trading, flying, mining, living like they always had under the Empire's boot. The next, only silence. No distress beacons, no wreckage, just silence, like the stars swallowed them. They sent in reconnaissance units. None came back. Then elite strike forces. Still nothing. Finally, the Emperor himself addressed the galaxy, standing atop his obsidian podium like a god. "I do not fear shadows," he said. "We are the light of the galaxy. No relic of the past will stop our glory." That was the last time I saw his face. 3 hours later, the Imperial capital fell. Just vanished. I was watching the live feed from a news drone when it happened. 1 second, the camera showed the capital, shimmering towers, banners waving in artificial wind, orbiting satellites twinkling like jewelry. The next second, static. No explosion. No flare. Just gone. Panic spread faster than war ever did. Every fleet tried to reposition. Every outpost scrambled codes. The nobility fled to hidden bunkers. Civilians packed into ships and launched themselves into nowhere. But you can't hide from something you don't understand. Rumors became our only source of news. A mining vessel swore they saw it. The ship, black as space, unmoving, soundless, hanging over the remains of a dead star. A mercenary crew claimed to intercept a transmission. 3 words spoken in an old Earth tongue. "We remember everything." I didn't sleep after that. I barely breathed. I kept asking myself, how? How could they come back from ashes, from nothing? Earth was glass, its colonies butchered, its name erased from galactic maps. The Empire had made sure of that. And yet, here it was. Something that shouldn't exist, something not even the Empire could fight. Then came the final blow. In every corner of the galaxy, Imperial flags turned black. Not burned, not torn, just changed, as if something had overwritten them. Every device, every display, even cloth. Black flags, no symbols, no words, except one. Redemption comes in silence. That's when we knew. It wasn't an attack. It was a message. And whatever was left of Earth, whatever shadow of its pain survived, was no longer human in the way we understood. It was a storm, a judgment, a reckoning, and it was far from over. 3 days after the capital vanished, I got my first direct order in weeks. Return to Earth's perimeter. Observe, report, do not engage. Earth's perimeter. They might as well have told me to fly into a black hole. I wasn't even sure Earth still existed. Nobody had mapped it since the Purge, and even those records were buried under layers of encrypted, red-stamped files no soldier was ever meant to see again. But I was a man without a choice. The Empire was crumbling, our chain of command was shattered, and orders were the only thing we had left. So I boarded the Vagrant's End, my long-range scout vessel, and set course for what used to be Sol system. The moment I left Empire space, everything changed. The stars looked colder. The silence between transmissions dragged longer. It wasn't just fear. I'd flown into enemy territory before. This was something else. It was like the universe itself held its breath. As I crossed the outer edge of the old Terran system, static swallowed my sensors. Not jamming. This was deeper. Like the system itself had no interest in being perceived. For 2 days, I drifted blind, my engines whisper quiet to avoid detection by whatever haunted these ruins. And then I saw it. Earth. Still there. Still spinning, but it was no longer the blue planet I remembered from training hollows. The oceans were gone, turned into obsidian plates that reflected no light. The land masses were jagged, cracked like broken glass, as if tectonic rage had split the planet from its soul. And the sky, if you could call it that, was covered in a metallic sheen that moved like oil, and hanging above it, perfectly still, was the ship. No engines, no exhaust trails, no light, just a jagged, angular mass of black metal that seemed to drink the stars behind it. No markings, no language, no insignia. And yet, I knew it was watching me. I activated the End's stealth protocol and drifted toward a shattered moon fragment. From there, I tried to scan the ship, any data, even a frequency spike, but the system fed me only gibberish. And then it happened. My screen turned black, not off, just black, and words appeared slowly, line by line, like something typing from the void. You destroyed our home. You erased our name. But memory is stronger than death. I tried to shut it down, tried to restart. Nothing worked. The ship had taken control. My hands trembled as the words continued. We are not human. We are what you made us. Then a final message. You will see. The screen flashed white, and the next thing I knew, I wasn't in the ship anymore. I was on Earth, not the Earth I saw from orbit, but the old Earth. Trees, sky, wind, children laughing in a park, a woman humming a lullaby as she pushed a stroller, a man sitting on a bench reading from a tablet with a tired smile. Peaceful, beautiful, but wrong. Because the moment I looked closely, I saw the cracks. The stroller had no wheels. It hovered, silently, inches off the ground, flickering now and then like a faulty hologram. The trees moved too perfectly. The sun shone with no warmth. This wasn't a place. It was a memory, or a prison. I turned and saw him. A man in a uniform I didn't recognize, standing near the fountain. Tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes were too still, like he hadn't blinked in hours. And when he spoke, it wasn't to me, it was to the sky. They thought burning our cities would end us, he said. They thought glass and silence would erase our story. I approached cautiously. Who are you? He looked at me, finally. His face was human, but stretched, too smooth, like someone trying to remember what skin should look like. We were the last, he said. We saw the end, and we made a choice. What choice? He turned back to the fountain. To become something they couldn't kill? The scene around us started to warp. The children flickered, their laughter turning into static. The sky twisted into fire. The park burned, and the man remained still. They dropped their bombs. They sent their drones. They laughed while we burned, he whispered. But we buried something deeper than memory, deeper than fear. and then he looked at me with eyes no longer human. We buried our rage. I woke up gasping in my cockpit, soaked in sweat, the console blinking red. I'd been gone for 6 hours, and the ship was gone. No trace, no signal. Only Earth remained, silent and black. I turned the ship around and fled. I didn't stop until I reached an old trade route near the edge of the Dasker Belt, where an Empire outpost still flickered with life. Only, when I got there was no Empire left. The outpost had declared independence. The officers were burning their insignia. Soldiers stood with civilians, looting supply crates, tearing down portraits of the Emperor. Chaos ruled. I didn't even dock. I watched from orbit, stunned, as a fellow scout transmitted a single phrase across all channels. The Empire fell in 1 week. It didn't make sense. A government that had ruled for 1,000 years, gone in days? But then I saw the footage, the black flags, the static broadcasts, cities blinking out like stars snuffed by night. Ships turned to dust with no sign of weapons fire, planets surrendering to nothing. The Empire hadn't been defeated by war, it had been unmade, and no one knew how to fight a ghost. I tried to reach command. No response. I sent encrypted pings to old friends, pilots, mercs, smugglers, anyone. The answers were all the same. It's not a ship, it's a message. It's a reckoning. We're not the top of the food chain anymore. Then came the final proof. A transmission from the deepest sector, where the Empire had exiled its most dangerous prisoners. A penal colony built into the crust of a dead world. It had only one rule. No one gets out. And yet, the broadcast showed the gates wide open, and every prisoner gone. No escape pods, no ships, just a word scrawled into the rock by hand. Justice. I stared at the screen for hours, numb. There were no explanations, no targets, no war, just silence, and the memory of a people turned into something the Empire couldn't kill. We'd laughed at Earth. We'd crushed its bones. We'd erased its story. And now it had returned. Not as survivors, but as punishment. I turned my ship to deep space. I wasn't going to fight this. I wasn't going to serve another flag. I just wanted to disappear, but I couldn't escape the final message burned into my ship's console. No matter how many times I erased it, it returned. The past is never gone. It waits. And I knew. I would see that ship again. We all would, because humanity didn't die. It evolved into something the galaxy will never forget. I drifted through the outer rims of known space, hoping distance could do what courage couldn't. Buy me time. Time to think. Time to understand what we had woken. Every jump I made took me deeper into lawless sectors, where no flags flew and no patrols dared follow. I told myself I was hiding. I told myself I was being smart. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't running from them. I was running from myself, from the uniform I still wore, from the rank stitched into my collar, from the blood on my hands. Because I'd served the Empire. I'd followed every order. I'd watched colonies burn, watched families torn apart, watched the slow erasure of anything the Empire deemed unworthy, including Earth, especially Earth. We didn't fight humans. We exterminated ghosts. The records painted them as primitives clinging to outdated ideals. Honor, freedom, family. They resisted occupation with sticks and stones and cheap rhetoric, and for that, the Empire turned them into ash. But they hadn't stayed dead. The more I thought about the man in the memory park, the more I understood. He wasn't a person. He was a warning, a fragment, a whisper of a civilization that refused to forget. And now they'd come back, rebuilt from rage, from silence, from loss. They'd taken everything we had, not with bombs or bullets, but with truth. That was the weapon none of us saw coming. My ship, the vagrant's end, limped through a derelict trade corridor known as the Black Spine, an ancient, broken path once used by Earth traders before the Purge. The place was haunted by wreckage, long-forgotten ships floating in cold silence, covered in moss-like metal corrosion and dust. The kind of place only smugglers and desperate men dared explore. I docked with an old Terran cargo ship, rusted, silent, massive. Its hull bore the faded symbol of an old Earth resistance group. Crimson Tide. I'd heard that name before. They were labeled terrorists by the Empire, hunted to extinction for hijacking weapons convoys during the war. But inside the ship, there were no signs of struggle. No skeletons. No messages. Just one thing. A cryo chamber. Still running. Still occupied. I stared at it for what felt like an eternity. The glass was fogged, but I could make out the shape inside. A man, wrapped in tubes, suspended in time. The chamber bore a label etched into old Earth standard. Captain Lorne Radek, authorized awakening, final protocol only. I didn't know who he was, but the name sent a chill through me. Radek, the ghost from resistance myths, the man who supposedly detonated the Antares pipeline and vanished without a trace. Imperial records branded him a war criminal, but legends told a different story. They said he was the last real human leader before Earth fell. I should have left him frozen. I didn't. I entered the code burned into the side of the chamber, 134 Nova, and triggered the override. The chamber hissed, the ice receded, and a moment later, the man inside gasped awake, his body shaking, covered in sweat and fury. His eyes snapped open, and for the first few seconds, he didn't breathe like a man. He breathed like a storm. I backed away, my hand on my weapon. But he didn't attack. He just sat up, coughing, staring at the emptiness around him. And then he spoke, voice hoarse, but steady. "They did it, didn't they?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, they did." He looked at me, really looked, like he could see everything behind my eyes, the fear, the guilt, the part of me still clinging to orders that no longer mattered. "They erased us," he whispered, "but we were never gone." I told him everything, about the ship, the disappearances, the flags, the fall of the Empire. He listened in silence, occasionally nodding, as if none of it surprised him. When I finished, he stood up and walked to the console. Fingers danced across the dusty keys with muscle memory that defied age. "Then it's time," he said. "Time for what?" He turned to me. "For you to learn the truth." What followed wasn't a debrief. It was a confession. Radek had been part of Earth's final resistance cell, Project Phoenix. They knew they couldn't beat the Empire with ships or soldiers. They didn't have the numbers. What they had was desperation, and a single, radical plan. They would record the last moments, not just as data, but as living memory. Conscious thought, emotion, pain, all encoded into a synthetic neural seed, a consciousness that could wait, hide, survive. They called it the archive, and they buried it in orbit beneath Earth's surface, protected by a fail-safe warship equipped with quantum cloaking tech decades ahead of the Empire. The Obsidian Wake. The ship I saw. "It wasn't built to fight," Radek said. "It was built to remember, to awaken when the time came." "And judge?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes, but not like a god, like a mirror." I didn't know what to say. Everything I believed, everything I fought for, it was all unraveling. And the worst part? Deep down, I already knew. I saw what the Empire had done. I just didn't care. Until now. Radek moved to the viewport, staring into space, his voice low. "You ever wonder why they feared us so much? Why they burned every trace?" I didn't answer. He turned to me, eyes sharp. "Because we remembered who we were, and that terrified them." Something beeped on my console. An incoming signal, untraceable, raw binary. It translated into coordinates, near the ruins of the Vega relay station. Radek grinned. They're calling us. You think the archive knows you're awake? I think, he said, strapping into the co-pilot seat. They've been waiting. We jumped within the hour. I didn't care about orders anymore. I wanted answers. We dropped out of hyperspace to find wreckage. Vega Station had been torn apart. No scorch marks, no impact debris. Just opened, like something dissecting a carcass. But floating at the center of the debris was a small black box. Radek retrieved it with a drone, hand shaking slightly as he cracked it open. Inside, a sphere, no bigger than a human eye, flickering with dark light. The archive sent this, he whispered. What is it? He placed it gently on the console. Proof. He touched it, and the world vanished. We were inside again, but not a memory, a history. We saw Earth fall. We saw the soldiers marching through burning cities, the Empire branding children, executing teachers, destroying libraries, uploading propaganda into every broadcast, and then we saw the resistance, the stolen weapons, the final stand. We saw Radek screaming as his wife bled out in his arms, refusing evacuation. We saw them build the archive in secret, encoding their minds, their souls, into something eternal. And we saw the Emperor. Not the man the Empire worshipped, but the butcher. Cold, smiling as he watched Earth burn. We made them, Radek said. We made the monsters that returned. When we returned to the ship, the sphere cracked open, and the signal came again. This time, it was an invitation. Come to Earth, stand on the ashes, hear the verdict. Radek looked at me. You don't have to come. I stared out into the black, my voice low. I do. And for the first time in my life, I understood what it meant to stand for something. Not a flag, not a government, but a truth that refused to die. The jump back to Earth wasn't like any other. We weren't headed into enemy territory anymore. We were headed into the graveyard of truth, a place soaked in betrayal, in silence, in echoes of everything humanity once was, and everything the Empire tried to erase. Radek sat beside me, silent, jaw tight, his eyes locked forward like a man marching toward his own execution. I didn't speak. What was there to say? We both knew this wasn't a mission. It was a reckoning. The ship shuddered as we dropped into orbit. Earth loomed below, black, scarred, and unnatural. From space, it looked like a wound in the galaxy, still festering, still open. But something had changed. The surface shimmered with veins of red light, pulsing slowly beneath the cracked continents, as if the planet itself had begun to breathe. The sky was no longer dead. It churned with smoke-like currents, forming patterns that almost looked like words. Warnings, names, screams, and there, hovering above the equator, waiting, was the ship. The Obsidian Wake. It hadn't moved since I last saw it, but this time, we were not ignored. As we approached, a voice filled the cockpit. Calm, mechanical, inhuman. Identity confirmed, Lorne Radek, clearance level, final flame. Then it turned to me. Unknown designation, registered Imperial, clearance denied. I glanced at Radek, unsure. He didn't blink. He's with me, he said. A pause. Then, accepted. A docking tunnel extended from the side of the ship, black metal folding outward like bone. No sound, no lights, just invitation. I strapped my sidearm to my leg. Radek didn't bother with a weapon. Won't need it, he muttered. The moment we stepped inside, it hit me. The temperature dropped, but it wasn't just cold. It was absence. Like the ship had sucked the warmth out of the universe. The walls pulsed with faint light, and beneath every surface was a hum. Not mechanical, not digital. A heartbeat. It wasn't a ship. It was alive. "Where are we going?" I asked. "To meet them," Radek said. "Who?" He didn't answer. We followed a corridor that bent in impossible angles. Gravity shifted subtly with every step, as if the ship couldn't decide what direction down was. I tried not to think about it. Tried not to think about the fact that this vessel had survived in silence for over a century, not waiting for rescue, waiting for vengeance. At the end of the corridor, a door opened silently, and we stepped into the archive. It wasn't a room. It was a void, endless black with millions, maybe billions of floating lights, each pulsing softly in its own rhythm, like stars or souls. And then they spoke, not aloud, inside us, a voice that wasn't a voice. "You returned to the place you killed." Radek stood tall. "I never left." "You bring one of them." I stepped forward. "I came to know the truth." A pause. Then the void shifted. The lights swirled, and in the center of the darkness, a single image formed. A child, alone, crying, covered in dust. "Her name was Anya," the archive said. "She was 5 years old. When the Empire's drones struck her shelter, her father used his own body to shield her. It wasn't enough." The image changed. A man, bound, tortured. He was a historian. He refused to alter Earth's records to reflect Imperial doctrine. He was executed in front of his students. Another image. A woman, holding a gun, tears streaming down her face. She led the last civilian evacuation. When the Empire intercepted their ships, she detonated them rather than let her people be enslaved. She killed herself last. I wanted to look away, but I didn't, because this wasn't war. This was memory, and it wanted to be remembered. Radek stepped into the light. "We didn't forget," he said. "You waited, you endured, and now you judge." The archive pulsed. "We do not seek revenge. We seek reckoning. We seek balance." "Then what happens now?" I asked. The archive grew silent, and then, I was no longer in the ship. I was on Earth, not in a memory, not in a vision. Physically there. The obsidian wake had transported us, or restructured matter, or some other insane miracle I couldn't begin to understand. Radek stood beside me, unfazed, breathing in the scorched air like it was home. We stood on the remains of what was once New London, a city built by Earth's resistance, destroyed in the second wave of Imperial cleansing. Skyscrapers lay half buried in molten earth. The air shimmered with static. But here and there were signs of life. Green sprouts, vines crawling over dead concrete. And then we saw them. Figures, not soldiers, not machines. People. At least, I thought they were people. They walked slow. Their skin shimmered like it was made of memory and light. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their faces bore no anger, only weariness. They surrounded us in silence. One stepped forward. A woman, her features soft but unblinking. "You wear the crest of those who murdered our children," she said to me. I tore the patch from my shoulder and dropped it in the ash. "I did," I said. "But not anymore." She stared at me, then turned to Radek. "You carry guilt." "I carry all of it," he replied. She nodded once, and then pointed to a structure, an ancient dome, partially collapsed. "The tribunal awaits." Inside the dome, 3 chairs sat upon a raised platform, empty, until, as we watched, 3 figures appeared. Holograms, projections, memories maybe. It didn't matter. They were Earth's final judges. They didn't speak. They looked. And then our minds were opened. I don't know how else to describe it. I saw every moment of my service, the raids, the orders followed without question, the names forgotten after each mission, every scream I never heard because I was too proud to listen. They saw it all, and they did the same to Radek. But his memories were different. His were filled with desperation, with grief, with sacrifice, and with betrayal The tribunal turned to him first. "You preserved us, but you also failed to act when it mattered most." "I did," Radek said, "and I would carry that shame forever." Then they turned to me. "You followed. You served. But you also watched and did nothing." "I won't deny it," I whispered. "Why come here?" "Because I couldn't live with the lie anymore." The figures were silent. Then you will not live as you were." The dome trembled. The light shifted, and the decision was made. Radek collapsed. I caught him, panic rising, but he was alive, just unconscious. But changed. His eyes fluttered open moments later, and when they did, they glowed faintly. "What did they do to you?" I asked. He looked at his hands. "They gave me a piece of the archive," he said. "I carry it now." "And me?" He stared at me for a long time. "They spared you," he said, "but you're marked. Forever." I looked down and saw the same phrase etched faintly into the skin of my palm. "We remember." Not a punishment, a promise. The mark on my palm didn't fade. Not after we left the tribunal. Not after we stepped back aboard the Obsidian Wake. Not even when the ship folded space itself and delivered us back to the far edges of Empire's ruins. We remember. Those two words haunted every breath I took. I didn't sleep that night, not really. I drifted in and out of awareness, gripped by visions I couldn't escape. Images not from my life, but someone else's. An old man watching his grandchildren play in a crater where a city once stood. A young woman reading poetry inside a shelter, knowing bombs were minutes away. A boy clinging to a corpse too long gone to recognize. They weren't dreams. They were implants. Pieces of the archive seeded into my mind like whispers in the dark. The Empire had called them enemies. Now I carried them inside me. Radek didn't speak much after the awakening. He'd changed, not just in his eyes, or the way his voice dropped half an octave, but in the way he carried silence. It was heavier now, more deliberate. As if every word he didn't say mattered more than the ones he did. We left Earth behind without a word. It didn't follow us. It didn't need to. The verdict had already spread, and the galaxy was responding. When we jumped back to the outer edges of what used to be Imperial space, we found chaos. Not war, not rebellion. Fear. Planets once loyal to the Empire were turning on each other. Local governors declared independence overnight, scrambling to distance themselves from the Imperial bloodstain. Nobles tried to erase digital histories, burning archives, rewriting their legacies. But the archive was faster. Entire broadcast networks were hijacked. Screens flashed faces, real faces of victims, children, civilians, resistance fighters, each with the same cold phrase beneath their images. We remember. The truth was no longer hidden in classified files or whisper networks. It was viral, and it had no mercy. Some planets tried to fight it, fired on relay satellites, blocked data ports, shut down global nets. Didn't matter. The archive had buried itself in memory, in minds, and like infection, it spread. The past had become a weapon, and no one knew how to defend against it. We stopped at a small outpost near the Ashari Verge, formerly a supply station for the Imperial 12th Fleet. I used to refuel there during recon runs. It had been loud then. Soldiers drinking, whores laughing, gamblers shouting. Now, dead silent. The station's lights flickered like it had lost the will to shine. We docked cautiously. Radek walked ahead, his coat flaring behind him like a flag of old vengeance. I followed, hand twitching near my sidearm, not from fear, but from habit. We passed the first body near the main atrium. Not shot, not stabbed, suicide. Blaster to the mouth. Helmet still on, and beside him, a portable screen replaying an old clip. An Empire soldier, himself, younger, laughing, kicking a bound prisoner in the ribs during an interrogation. No trial, no verdict, just memory. "I don't know how the archive is doing this," I muttered. "It's not the archive," Radek said, eyes cold. "It's guilt. They're showing us our sins." "No," he said. "They're letting us show ourselves." We moved deeper into the station, passing more bodies, more screens. The place had turned into a mirror, a reflection of everything we were told to forget. And it was killing people, not through force, through truth. In the command room, we found the station's central AI offline, deliberately shut down. The logs were fragmented, corrupted, but one file remained intact, a single voice recording. And we thought we were right, that they were the savages, that we were saving the galaxy from chaos. But I see now, we were the chaos. We were the plague. If you're hearing this, don't come looking for me. I don't deserve to be remembered. It ended in static. Radek didn't flinch. I wanted to scream. Because these were my people, my brothers in arms. We believed in order, in peace through strength. We brought light to the dark places of the galaxy. Or so we were told. But standing there, surrounded by corpses and shame, I realized we were the dark. The archive hadn't just destroyed the Empire, it had unmasked it, made it look in the mirror, and the image was too horrifying to bear. We left that station and headed toward Kernak's Rift, where the last known Imperial battle group was reported. Not to fight, to speak, to warn, to beg, maybe. We found the fleet in shambles, ships adrift, comms silent, crews barely functioning. The bridge of the command carrier, once pristine, was now a riot of smashed consoles and old blood. They'd fought something, or each other, but they were alive. Their admiral, Gale Dorn, stood tall when we arrived, though the lines in his face were deeper than I remembered. I'd served under him once. He'd been ruthless, brilliant, feared. Now he looked tired. "Hart," he greeted me. "Didn't expect to see you again." "Didn't expect to be back." He glanced at Radek, recognizing him instantly. "No Imperial file had the stones to even say your name." Radek just nodded. Dorn gestured around. "You here to finish us off?" "We're not here to fight," I said. "We're here to explain." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "You think I don't know? Every screen on this ship flashes their faces. I can't take a piss without seeing someone I killed 20 years ago." He dropped into his chair. "I served for order," he muttered. "For stability. Not this." "They're not seeking revenge," I said. "They're telling the story we buried." "Same thing," Dorn snapped. "You tell a man the truth often enough, and it kills him just the same." He wasn't wrong, but I had to believe there was still a path forward. "Not if you face it," Radek said. Dorn glared at him. "Face it and do what? Apologize? Fall on a blade?" "Maybe," Radek said. "Or maybe you use what's left of your power to stop others from repeating it." A long silence followed. Then Dorn stood, walked to a terminal, and opened a channel to the fleet. "This is Admiral Dorn. Effective immediately, the 7th Battle Group stands down. We will not resist the archive. We will not erase the truth. All hands are ordered to secure civilian ports and provide aid. If you can't live with what you've done, find peace. If you can live with it, do better." He looked back at me, eyes dim. "That's the best I've got." It was more than I expected. Maybe more than we deserved. We left the fleet in silence. No cheers, no applause, just a whisper of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The 7th Battle Group didn't send out distress calls after Dorn's surrender. They didn't boast, didn't beg. They simply stopped fighting. And that made the archive move. Not with ships, not with weapons, but with a signal, one we hadn't heard before. It arrived in bursts, low frequency, pulsing code that spread like static across every known communication line. Civilian, military, pirate, black market. It reached everyone. There was no source to trace, no origin point to block. The archive had embedded itself too deep. This wasn't a message of threat. It was an invitation, a wordless call to those who still carried the Empire's mark, to come, to see, to stand in the place where history had been rewritten in blood and silence, and face it. Radek and I watched the signal replay in silence. "What happens if they answer it?" I asked. He didn't look at me, just stared at the pulsing code. "They either break," he said softly, "or they change." We followed the trail of the signal to the worn belt, a region littered with derelict stations and ancient orbital wreckage. Back when Earth still breathed, this belt was their last line of supply. It was here the Empire launched its final blow. They called it Operation Glass Crown, an orbital bombardment campaign so brutal that every Earth-Moon colony collapsed in under a day. No survivors, no reports, no resistance. The archive had brought us back here for a reason. We arrived on a half-collapsed station drifting silently among the remains of war. Its hull was torn, its life support minimal. Yet inside, the walls were clean, preserved, as if something had been protecting it all these years. Inside that dead station, we found a tomb, but not of bodies, of names, rows and rows of digital walls etched with tens of thousands of identities, civilians, fighters, children, people who never had graves, never had mourning. Each name flickered in a dull, warm light, one after another. And at the center of the chamber, a glowing pedestal with a single symbol burned into it. We remember. It wasn't just a mantra anymore. It was a way of being. I ran my hand along the pedestal. A hum buzzed beneath my fingertips, low and familiar, like the archive knew I had been judged and marked. And then I saw my own name, there, etched beside names of victims, not bold, not glowing, but waiting for me to decide what I'd be when this all ended. Radek stood behind me, silent. I looked at him. "You think they want us to build something here?" He shook his head. "Number, that's not their job anymore." "Then what?" He looked up at the broken ceiling. Beyond it, stars flickered cold and uncaring. "They're letting us choose." I didn't know what that meant until 3 days later, when we received a new transmission, not from the archive, but from a fringe colony out in the Cirrus dust veil. It was a human voice, terrified, broken, begging. "This is Delran 7. Please, if anyone can hear this, we're under attack. It's not the archive, it's raiders, slavers. They think the archive took the Empire's teeth. They think we're easy now." I looked at Radek. He nodded once. "We go." It wasn't a command. It was a choice, and I made it without hesitation. We arrived on Delran 7 within the day, jumping through dead lanes, evading ancient satellites still programmed to fire on Earth-born tech. The planet was burning when we dropped from orbit, columns of smoke rising into the sky, settlement fires visible from space. The archive hadn't touched this world. It had left it alone. But others had moved in. The lawless, the predators, the ones who'd thrived under the Empire's blind eye. Now they were tearing apart colonies once protected by lies. We landed outside the Capitol Dome. And we fought. Not for glory, not for redemption, but because it was right. The first man I shot wore no uniform, just scavenged armor and a crooked smile. He screamed when he died, loud, human, afraid. No honor in it, no pride, only necessity. Radek moved through the battlefield like a ghost. He didn't fire often. He didn't need to. Every shot he took ended a life. Every blow he landed collapsed a path of cruelty. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were consequences. The battle lasted 12 hours. 12 hours of blood, fire, and reckoning. When it was over, Delrin 7 was a ruin. But it was free, and the people saw us, not as saviors, but as witnesses. That night, a young boy approached me in the ruins of a marketplace. His face was streaked with ash. His hand held a makeshift blade, no older than a kitchen knife. He looked up at me, eyes full of something I hadn't seen in years. Belief. "Are you Archive?" he asked. I knelt down. "No," I said, "but I remember." He didn't smile. He just nodded. That was enough. We stayed 2 more days, helping the wounded, organizing defenses, burying the dead. Radek barely spoke. But each night, he wandered the fields, alone, listening to something only he could hear. On the 3rd night, he came back changed. "They're calling again," he said. "Where?" He looked at the stars. "Everywhere." And so we left, not as soldiers, not as rebels, but as men who chose to remember. The war had ended long ago, but the unmaking, that was just beginning. Radek and I became wanderers, not by design, but by necessity. Everywhere the Archive's message had touched, we found aftermath. Some systems still clung to the old ways, pretending the Empire might return. Others shattered into civil unrest, local lords declaring themselves free, only to reenact the same oppressions under new flags. But in the cracks, we found something rare. Growth, not the easy kind, not the celebratory kind, the kind that grows in fire, in regret, in cold reflection. The kind that turns men into something new, not because they want to, but because they must. We had no command structure, no fleet, no resources beyond the weapons on our backs and the stories etched into our skin. But wherever we went, people listened. Not because of us, because of the mark we carried. We remember. By now it had become a sign, a symbol scratched into ruins, spray-painted on broken walls, etched into dog tags found on corpses of those who chose to die facing truth instead of hiding behind denial. It had power, more than any emperor's edict ever did. And for some, that power was terrifying. The first time we encountered a faction that resisted the Archive's influence openly, we were deep in the Yovar Expanse. A former stronghold world, it had once been a strategic empire refueling hub, known for its vicious security battalions and elite intelligence programs. The place had been silent for months. No communications, no trade, too quiet. We landed on its surface under false transponder codes. The city was still there, but something was off. Too clean. Too still. The streets were manicured, the signs painted over. Children played in parks while patrols passed without acknowledgement. And no one, not a single soul, wore the mark. No, we remember, not even a whisper. I leaned into Radek as we walked past a pristine monument to the Empire's old founder. "You see what I see?" He nodded. "They've sterilized memory," I spat. "Why?" "Because truth is dangerous," he said, "and they think silence is safety." We kept walking. Eyes followed us, calculated, measuring, not out of fear, but suspicion, as if the people here weren't living but reciting, like actors on a stage. At the heart of the city, in what used to be a military archive center, we met their governor, a tall, polished man in ceremonial armor that hadn't seen real war in decades. His face was lined with surgical precision, his posture artificial. "You come bearing the Archive's disease," he said without preamble. Radek didn't flinch. "We come bearing the truth." "The same thing," the governor sneered, "and truth spreads like cancer when left untreated." I stepped forward. "You really believe lies keep people safer?" He didn't answer me. Instead, he gestured to a massive hollow screen behind him. A young girl's face appeared. No older than 8, big eyes, hollow expression. "She was born after the Purge," he said. "She never saw the war, never knew the Empire. And yet your archive filled her head with images of executions and firebombs and betrayals. You know what she did?" He paused. "She walked into a fusion vent and melted." The room went silent. The weight of his words hit hard, but not for the reason he thought. He wanted guilt, regret, shame. But what I felt was resolve. "She saw the truth," I said, voice low, "and couldn't reconcile it with the lie she was raised in. That's not on us. That's on you." "You call that justice?" "I call it reality," Radek growled. "And reality doesn't care how comfortable you are." The governor's face tightened. "This system will not fall to chaos. We will not become another sobbing corner of the galaxy begging the archive for forgiveness." "You think that's what this is about?" I snapped. "Forgiveness?" I stepped closer. "It's about not lying anymore." I thought he'd argue, shout, threaten. Instead, he pressed a small button on his arm console, and gas began to fill the room. My instincts kicked in. I held my breath, reached for my mask. But I knew it wouldn't matter. This wasn't knockout gas. It was a truth killer. But Radek didn't reach for his mask. He just looked at me and smiled. "I won't forget," he whispered. Then the room exploded. Not in flames, in light. When I woke up, I wasn't on the floor. I wasn't even in the same world. I was in the archive again, floating, drowning, and the voices returned. He chose to carry memory into the place memory was banned. He gave his breath for a name, and so he becomes more than one. I tried to speak, tried to scream, and then I saw Radek, not beside me, inside me, his memories, his pain, his fury. It bled into mine, merged, folded. And when I gasped awake again, lungs on fire, heart slamming, I was alone. The governor was dead, killed by his own gas, and Radek's body was gone, not taken, integrated. His death wasn't death, it was transference. He had become part of the archive. And now so had I. I stumbled out of the chamber, my veins humming with energy that wasn't mine. Faces swirled in my mind, names, places, lives long lost, and one phrase burned behind my eyes. "You are the witness now." I didn't return to the ship. I didn't need to. The vagrant's end had already begun to broadcast a new signal, automated, echoing across dozens of systems. A single pulse. The witness is born. Word spread faster than any transmission I'd ever known. Not through code or language, through memory. People started arriving. From fringe worlds, fallen colonies, shattered fleets, survivors, soldiers, deserters, teachers, refugees. They didn't come to fight. They came to confess. And I stood among them, listening. I didn't speak, not for days. I just let them pour it out. Names they betrayed, people they failed, lies they told themselves to sleep at night. Each confession carved something deeper into me. Not pain, not power, purpose. I was the last piece of Radek. The last breath of Earth's resistance, not a leader, not a killer, a mirror. And everywhere I went, the archive followed. Not in ships, in truth. Truth that no longer needed to be shouted or forced. Truth that lived. We didn't raise armies. We raised awareness. And it changed everything. On Gorseth Prime, a warlord dissolved his militia after kneeling before a wall of names. On Zendara, a young girl tore down the last Imperial statue with her bare hands, screaming her grandmother's name into the dust. On Jackson's Belt, pirates surrendered control of their black market relay and turned it into a library. A place to remember. It wasn't peace. It wasn't order. But it was real. For the first time in 1,000 years, it was real. And that was enough. The archive never stopped growing. It didn't spread through technology or violence or conquest. It grew through witnesses, people who had seen too much lost too much, or done too much to pretend anymore. People like me. I stopped thinking of myself as a man with a past. I became a man with a ledger written in names, in memories, in burned cities and vanished planets. I didn't need to speak anymore. Just being present was enough. When I stepped onto a planet, people felt it, like the weight of a storm approaching. Some ran, some wept, some dropped to their knees and confessed. The archive didn't want obedience. It wanted truth. And truth doesn't care about your rank, your medals, or your justifications. It doesn't care if you wept while you pulled the trigger. It just stands there, unblinking, waiting for you to admit it. We used to think forgetting was survival. Now we knew. Forgetting is the disease. I found myself back on Earth one last time. Not for mission, not for judgment, just to listen. The planet had changed again. The veins of red that once throbbed beneath the surface were now slow, faint. The black sky shimmered less aggressively. The anger wasn't gone. It had just settled. The obsidian wake floated silently above the ruins, no longer a weapon, just a marker, like a tombstone at the end of history. I walked through what was once New London. The dome had collapsed fully now. Nature, wild, defiant, was reclaiming the streets. Vines crept over scorched statues. Flowers grew through cracks in the pavement. Somewhere in the distance, birds cried. Not earth birds, but something new. Mutated, adapted, survivors. A small group of children followed me as I passed. Not close enough to speak, but close enough to see. I didn't look back. I didn't wave. But I knew what they were doing. They were watching. And maybe one day they'd remember. Near the center of the ruins I found the pedestal again, the one etched with names. There were more now. Tens of thousands more. I ran my hand along them, felt every syllable like a heartbeat. Then I felt a shift behind me. A presence. "You came back," a voice said. I turned slowly. An old man stood there. His eyes were clouded, but his spine was straight. He wore no armor, no symbols, just a ragged cloak and a look of someone who had lived too long among ghosts. "You knew Radek," I said. "I was his teacher," the man replied. "Long before the archive, before the war." I studied him. "Why are you still here?" He shrugged. "Because Earth is not just a place, it's a promise. Someone has to keep it." I nodded. We sat on the steps of a shattered courthouse. For a long time we said nothing, just breathed, listened. The wind carried voices. Whispers of memories, not quite real, not quite gone. "I used to think justice was about punishment," I finally said. "And now?" "Now I think it's about remembrance, about making sure the lie never replaces the truth again." He smiled faintly. "You carry too much." "I carry what I must." The man pulled a small object from his cloak, a chip, simple, black, unmarked. "Radek left this," he said. "Told me you'd know when the time was right." I took it carefully, fingers trembling. Plugged it into my data slate. A single file appeared. A message. Radek's voice. "I knew you'd make it here, Hart. Knew you'd keep going, because you always wanted to believe in something. Just never knew what. The archive was never about revenge. It was about continuity, a thread, a memory that couldn't be severed. The Empire feared that. Because deep down they knew. Truth is immortal." A pause. "You're the last now. The last soldier. The last bridge. The last witness. Don't let them forget. Not the victims, not the monsters, not even us." The message ended, and I finally cried. Not for him, not for me, but for everything lost to silence. 10 years passed. The galaxy rebuilt, not in the image of any empire, but in the image of acceptance. Some worlds chose isolation, others embraced unity, some hunted down remnants of the old regime, Others forgave, but no one forgot. The archive didn't need ships or armies anymore. It had people, witnesses, carriers of memory. I became a legend, not because I wanted to, but because I had no choice. Children asked for my story. Veterans asked for forgiveness. Tyrants asked for mercy, and I gave them all the same thing, the truth, no matter how much it hurt. In the end, I returned to where it all began, the wreckage of the Imperial capital, now a crater filled with regrowth, wild trees, birds, a river where once stood a throne. I buried my uniform there, the last piece of the old me, and on a stone I scratched the only words that mattered. We remember. Because in a galaxy once ruled by fire, silence had become the greatest weapon, and we, those broken enough to see, had become the final line of defense. Not with guns, with memory, with truth, and with the promise that no empire will ever erase us again.